the main reason I'm here is because STEM still looks a lot like this. If I did a Google search, which I did, of what scientist, an engineer, technologist, or computer scientist or mathematician looks like, it still comes up as mostly white, mostly male, and we need to change it up. I'd like to take a moment to point out that when I looked up mathematician, that's the photo that came up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he looks like a rock star. What is this? I don't know how many mathematicians do that, but he looks like he's really into himself, and I don't understand why. But imagine if this was like the lifestyle of a mathematician.
You can't tell if that's chalk or a cigarette.
I think it's chalk, but it's whatever you want it to be. So, given that this is what the industry still looks like, I'm working this space not in STEM, but like STEM adjacent, meaning I work in the education space. I do communications for a nonprofit program where we work with underrepresented students of color that are pursuing STEM. That said, there's still gaps along the way. So even if you get a good STEM education, what happens after that? How do you make sure that you don't fall through the leaks along the pipeline? And that's what I want to help out with today through some tips, tricks, and just some practical applications that I hope will be helpful to you. So I know that this is not news to you, but STEM jobs are on the rise. I think the last estimate I heard was like 1.4 million jobs in STEM are going to go unfilled by 2020, which is next year. So you're ready to go. Like this is the time to be looking for that. So STEM jobs are going up, and then along with that, the pay is like really, really nice. Part of it is because there's a low talent pool. The education system is not set up to really help people, especially people of color, really be competitive in these fields, just from an education standpoint. But I'm going to talk about another aspect of it that I hope to help you out with today. So, like I mentioned, low talent pool, and then for STEM professionals of color, it's even worse. Like it's just really, really low. And the causes of that are numerous. Even once you're in or just trying to get in there, there's bad hiring practices, there's unconscious bias, all of those things. But even before that, I think there is a gap in just the pre-work that needs to get done in order to just get your foot in the door for an interview. And so I think it's important, and one of the things that I really want to focus on is just as students of color, as professionals of color, we're not always taught that pre-work, and so that's just another way for us to fall through those leaks along that pipeline. And considering just how much technology there is nowadays, and the fact that people of color tend to be the most avid users of it, we're the first ones to really, figure out how to use it in a new and exciting way. But it's a lot of just consumption, of the technology. But we're never exactly, the actual producers of the technology, or really learn how do we leverage the existing technology to help empower ourselves. So we know how to use Snapchat, but we're not always as savvy with LinkedIn. A lot of it is just, we weren't taught how to do that in school. If you were lucky, you did a program that helped you out, or you had an internship and somebody said, hey, you should sign up for a LinkedIn profile. That's the only reason why I started one so many years ago. And it wasn't until I actually ended up working at LinkedIn that I realized the power of this that nobody had taught me until I actually somehow ended up in that space. So that's one of the things that I think is important to think about. Is like, we have all this technology, we're really good at using technology. How can we leverage that technology to help us get our foot in the door? All right, so I could go on and on. And now I actually have plenty of time because it's a smaller group, but I won't. So I'm just going to touch upon a few things that I hope will help make a difference. And it won't be exhaustive, given that it's just an hour workshop, but just the 3 things that I want you to kind of keep in mind. So when you go back and you figure out, okay, these are the 3 things I want to focus on, make sure I get right, that hopefully it'll help you along the way. So. Before I get into that, I just want to give some context of like where I started. So I was born Bay Area, born in Redwood City, raised in San Jose, and then eventually going into high school, fast forward, I ended up in a program called SMASH, which is what Gabe mentioned earlier. And so this program is for students of color, focused in STEM, providing rigorous education in that. And so then now I actually ended up working at Smash. So it was nice to kind of go full circle, but that's how I ended up meeting Gabe. But it was because of this opportunity. It was a free program that I was able to go to school in Chicago. And so then went to Chicago. I started off in the sciences, but I ended up shifting over to media and realized that is what I was more passionate about. So everything was looking good. I was on track to graduate with honors. I managed through Smash to find another internship for free. So I was like, okay, I think I have some work experience. Things look like I should be good to go. And then it was time to apply for jobs. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm finally gonna get dream job, success. I can be the excited white lady looking off into the sunset. It was gonna be so exciting and ready to go. However, that wasn't the case because what ended up happening was that I didn't have the basics of how to prepare a resume. This was just when LinkedIn was just coming out as well too. And I also didn't understand this whole networking thing as well. And then I realized that I wasn't alone in that anxiety, even though I definitely felt like I was. There was a lot of people who came from my community who had my same background that also just didn't understand how to master the basics and some of the things that more affluent counterparts, for them, it was like their bread and butter, their parents taught them, or they had connections through their parents that were able to help them know that from the beginning. So coming out of college, I was just getting ready to figure out how to start my job hunt, whereas I had friends who, because they were more affluent, because they had more connections, they already had their jobs set to go almost a year and a half in advance. So I felt like I was already falling behind, even though I was getting ready to graduate college. And that was not a fun feeling. So we're not alone. And so I wanted to distill it down to the 3 things that I think are important to focus on, that if you can master these basics and really play around with them and learn how to level up in each one of these, that'll help you, get your foot in the door a lot easier. So really thinking about branding yourself and then making yourself stand out from the rest. So these are the 3 things that I wanted to focus on. So first is your resume. So it seems like a very basic thing, but nowadays people are asking for more. How do you make yourself stand out when you got a pile of resumes? How do you make yourself stand out from the rest? You've gone to school, you've got experience. How do you tell folks so that they'll actually invite you to the interview after just looking at you from a short profile on a piece of paper, one-sided? If you're lucky, maybe 2-sided, but usually they just want one side. LinkedIn, are the 2 folks here, are you on LinkedIn already? You're not on LinkedIn, you are on LinkedIn. Cool, okay, y'all can help each other out too. This is great, awesome. So LinkedIn, it's a great tool for job hunting. It's a great tool for recruiters. Having worked at LinkedIn on the recruiting team, I was able to get a little bit of insight of how they use the tool and what the algorithms are looking for in that. So I want to be able to kind of let you know some of those things to look out for so that when you can add them to your LinkedIn profile, you'll show up in those algorithms too. And then finally, just this idea of having a network. There's the age-old adage that it's not what you know, it's who you know. There is some truth to that. It's not the whole truth, but it is an important thing to be considering as you're getting ready to enter the job hunt. All right, so one of the things that I kept hearing, and it's blank on purpose, don't worry. So one of the things that I kept hearing when I worked at LinkedIn or was getting ready to look for jobs was that you need to make yourself stand out in the industry. And I'm like, that's great, cool, how do I do that? Have any of you seen any of those things that went viral where it's oh, somebody really wanted to work at Spotify, so they created an entire Spotify page, branded page of their resume or something like that? Has anybody seen any of those things? No. Some people, okay, yeah. Some people go all out. So for example, what's his name? Philippe. He really, really wanted to work at Amazon. So this fool sat down and recreated his entire resume to look like an Amazon page. I think he wanted to be a product manager. And yeah, that's great. He had all the little different details showing how, passionate he is about the tool and everything. Great, awesome. If you can go above and beyond and you have the time and the, creative mind for it, absolutely go for it. But Not all of us have the time. Some of us have to work, so we might not be able to, take the time to do all of this. Some of us might not have the patience to do it. Some of us may not have the creative skills, and that's totally fine. And some of us just, may not have like the money for it, because time is money. And if you need to work, it's kind of hard to take the time to do all of this. And really, time is a very precious thing that often communities of color, you don't have it just because you're trying to make sure that, you're staying ahead. So how can you still make yourself stand out in a way that's manageable, in a way that's still authentic? Maybe this isn't your thing, and so why do you want to sell something that isn't naturally you? And something that's not going to, feels manageable but not discouraging. And of course, it's not super time consuming, and hopefully it can be a little bit fun too. And of course, free. I'm always happy about free. That's always great. So I think it's about starting by doing the basic things well. And so I know I said I was going to focus on 3 things. I'm going to start off by focusing on the resume and LinkedIn together, because they're both very much connected. So for the folks here, can you tell me some of like the differences or the similarities between your resume and a LinkedIn profile of what you know?
Well, resume is kind of like a short, sweet and simple sort of a summary of
Yeah.
what the abilities you have and could possibly get of that job.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn's kind of you're showing off, like maybe you have a video of you actually doing whatever you said on your resume that you can do. It's kind of like, here's my proof, here's the paper what it says I can do, and LinkedIn is like, it's just proof.
Got it. Yeah, exactly. So resume is like the condensed version that you're going to give up front. LinkedIn, it's like, oh, if they want to follow up and see more, they can go here. Yeah. Any thoughts?
No, I don't know like anything about LinkedIn.
Oh, we're going to have a great day. This is great. Oh, good. So other things to think about. Resume, it's a static representation of your experience, right? Whereas LinkedIn, it's more dynamic. You can constantly add to it. You can, ramp it up depending on where you are in your career. It's basically a living resume, which I think is really fun about it, and I started to really appreciate about the tool. Resumes, often paper, hard copy that you have on hand when you go to a career fair or anything like that. LinkedIn, it's electronic, but that doesn't mean that they can work together, because you can always put your link on the resume. And then also with resumes, I think it's important to, depending on the job that you're going for, you always want to cater your resume for that specific company or that specific role that you're pursuing, just because that's going to make you look a lot stronger. So, for example, like if I'm going to go for, a job in engineering, I'm probably not going to put my communications experience on that specific resume. I can have it on my LinkedIn profile, list out all my experience, but I'm probably going to put the most relevant thing that somebody in the hiring committee is going to want to know that I can do as an engineer. So, but the main thing that they have, the most basic, most important section that you'll find on both is, of course, your experience, your work experience. And experience, I like to think of it as these 3 different buckets, so that it'll actually, when you're conveying your experience, it's going to be conveyed in a way that's going to be best viewed by the people that are reviewing your resume. And so these are like the 3 things that people are looking at when they're looking at your work experience. So the first one is action. So basically, what did you do in this role? What actions? So definitely think about like the verbs. Did you manage? Did you develop? Did you code? All of those action words, you want to make sure that you have in that experience for whatever role you're looking at. You want to make sure that you're clear. You want to make sure you're precise and concise as well. Numbers, everybody loves numbers, and especially in STEM, people want to see those numbers. Data and metrics are very important to folks, especially in the hiring committee. They want to see an objective measure of your work. So how many people did your project affect? How many clients' accounts did you manage? How many, I don't know, remind me again, your civil engineering, and you are? Mechanical engineering, cool. So toss out, what are some of the numbers that you might be like listing on your resume?
Project completion.
Project completions.
Successful projects.
Successful projects, exactly.
I was gonna say the same thing, like how many projects.
Exactly. How many projects you worked on, how many people that are affected, how many people were on the team, if you were the team lead or something like that, so that shows your management skills. And then of course results. People want to see, how did you make a difference in this role for this particular project? Did you improve it? Did you improve it? Great. By how much? What number? By what percent? So having these 3 different things I think is really helpful, and will actually help make your resume experience and LinkedIn experience stand out a lot more, because it'll be more concrete for folks to understand. The other thing I wanted to talk about is thinking about your experience. What do you think counts as experience that you can list on your resume or your LinkedIn profile? Anything.
Well, anything that's relevant. So like if you're a civil engineer, more towards my perspective, kind of like, oh yeah, I designed this house just to see how it would look like if I actually built it in CAD. So you can kind of like show that off. I mean, you weren't working for a company, you weren't in an internship, but it kind of shows initiative that you're willing to put work.
Yep. How about for your major?
I guess just, I would say anything in, like, professionally that you've done that's related to your the job you want. But I'm not sure, maybe like unpaid internships, I guess, would also count as experience.
Yeah. So definitely work. Definitely any internships that you've had, any projects that you've worked on. But I want to like expand that thinking a little bit more. It's more than you think. I know for me, coming out of college, I tended to underestimate the amount of experience I had. So, for example, I was lucky enough that I did have an internship that I went back to every summer. So that's one piece of work experience I had. And then I had a campus job. So it's like, okay, 2 things. But I'm like, oh shoot, I'm seeing other people's resumes. They got a ton of stuff because they were able to have like 3 or 4 different internships because of the connections that they had. I didn't have that. But I was lucky enough that I had a fair amount of just lived experience through being very active on campus. And that is some kind of experience too that I think is important to consider, depending on the kind of role that you're going into and depending on the timing that you're going to apply for your role. So sometimes there's some experience like leadership. You know, if you were the project lead, that definitely shows your leadership. But say you want to be able to showcase that, but you haven't had that in your internship or your work experience so far. I, for one, listed that I was the president of my sorority. And so I needed leadership skills. I'm like, oh, okay, let's try that. I was also like the marketing person for a lot of my clubs on campus. So I did flyers for them, or I did social media. So there's PR and promo marketing experience that I can list as well. I needed to show that like, oh, I'm a good team player, and I had technical experience. So I talked about the group documentary project that I worked on in my senior year. So really it's trying to see if you can expand if it is relevant to the role that you're going into. Excuse me, I'm definitely thinking of or considering adding that in as well. And it doesn't have to be like the first thing in your experience, but lower down just so they can see that, oh, okay. Maybe further down if you're just going in as like an entry level, but they can see that you have leadership potential too. So, so we talked about experience, so we can go. Okay, so experience check. So now what? We level up.
Level up, level up, level up.
Anybody a Ciara fan? No? No? I need more ladies in this next time.
They'll be here.
They'll be here. All right, good, good. Well, they will appreciate it. All right, so couple of things, leveraging the online creative resources that are available. So if you're a programmer, of course, GitHub, making sure that you have that listed on your LinkedIn profile, have that anywhere so people can see your portfolio through that. I really like Canva. If you haven't tried Canva before, just if you're somebody that needs to check out something really creative very quickly, there's tons of templates on Canva, especially for resumes. So that's always like a quick cheat that I really like using. And then, of course, like if you have your own portfolio, you want to build that out, you want to show more of the creative aspect, definitely think of like Squarespace or Wix.com that have free accounts that you can use. They're really user-friendly. And so that's also like a fun project, just to also show the initiative that you're taking and showcasing your work. And that's just one way to kind of level up your resume as well. One thing to bear in mind, though, I come from a more creative background, but if your field is not as creative, you also want to make sure you don't go too creative, because maybe that's not their style. Maybe they just want it, black and white and everything, and that's totally fine too, as long as you make sure that your experience is showcased in a way that shows the actions you've taken, the numbers, and then the results in each of those different roles. So just something to keep in mind. For your LinkedIn, if you don't have one, start one. And if you do have one, make sure to update it. And then the 3 key ones that you want to focus on if you're just starting your LinkedIn profile is your headline, your summary, and your experience. So your headline is like right under my name. You can see it right there. So for mine, I put comms manager at Smash and Capewar Center, using my creative media powers for good, nonprofit CEO in the making. So it gives you what my role is. It gives you what I actually do in a more fun way than just saying like I do communications. And then it also gives a little bit of like what my goals are professionally. So at some point I want to be a nonprofit CEO. So that gives like a good little like professional summary of who I am just in your headline alone. And then I also wanted to make sure that it included some keywords in there so that when folks are potentially looking to recruit, maybe they want to recruit a nonprofit CEO or something like that, those things will be pulled in the algorithm so that they'll see me come up in that. Your summary, so that's right below the add a profile section. That's also a really important part too, that you want to make sure you complete because people will be looking at that. And you can think of it as almost like a personal statement. So it's dynamic. You can change it up, as you progress through your career. But basically, through that personal statement, you talk about like, who you are as a professional, what your goals are, what your values are, where you're going in your professional career as well. And you can also add, any accolades or things like that as well. And then finally, your experience. You want to make sure you talk about that. And one thing I found handy too, there's tons of online tutorials, whether they're presentations or they're videos of how you can pop your profile, rock your profile, all of those things that you can look up online and utilize for yourself. So, okay. So focus, 3 things, resume, LinkedIn, and then finally network. So there was 3 things. The last one I wanted to touch upon was network. And this idea of like having a network, is it truly about who you know, or is it what you know? It's both. But how many folks here feel like as they're about to enter the workforce that they have a pretty solid network? Mm-hmm. Feeling good about your network? How are you feeling about your network?
It's my second semester here, so.
Oh, okay. Well, you're in great shape. You're just starting to build. Well, not just starting, but you're in the process of adding on. Okay, cool. So who would you consider folks that that are in your network?
Well, we have investors, past clients, other engineers, other people in your field. Sometimes even like competing investors and competing teams.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
well, I mean, like, because since the first time we went to Capewar, that's when actually I found out about like LinkedIn. Was because of, what was his name? The one that led it that time? Sergio?
I don't remember. Dude from LA?
Yeah, because he was the one that kind of like really quickly introduced like, oh yeah, you should get one of these. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So
Yeah.
I just made one.
Nice.
And I kind of didn't really start thinking about networking until we went. But then I didn't know what it was until like,
Until you start, yeah.
Okay.
Good. And so you say you're in your second semester right now. Do you feel like you have a network? Did you come in with a network?
No.
No?
I feel like I might be building one.
You're building
with my
one now?
classmates and maybe professors too.
Yeah, exactly. Classmates, professors, anything like that. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my network and the person who's been in my network the longest. And that person is my mom. So that's my mom at her 50th birthday. Just happened like 2 weeks ago. But I think it's important to acknowledge family as part of your network too, especially for communities of color, students of color. We often don't think about our family. We always think it has to be a professional network that you have. But I want us to think that we are coming in with a network as well, and that we're just building on top of that. And the reason I say that my mom isn't my network is because she has helped me professionally as well. So she's an immigrant from Mexico. She did some junior college, but she didn't finish college, so she doesn't have her degree. But she still, hustled and everything and managed to land like a pretty, stable job in local government. But it's because of her that I found out about Smash. And it's also because of her that I managed to get my first job out of college at LinkedIn, because she knew somebody who knew my brother's football coach, and they happened to know somebody who worked at LinkedIn. And they're like, oh, hey, cool, And so I managed to, apply, get through the interview process. And yeah, so I bring that up just to help folks think of like expanding their idea of a network, because sometimes I know I felt coming into the workforce that like, oh, I'm not at the same level as my other peers because, my mom doesn't know the CEO of so-and-so, or my dad isn't like, a professional in the space. But I want to make sure that we don't underestimate the networks that we already have. So that's including family, friends, and really the folks that you're just meeting here now in school. Those are just added to your network too. So making sure, you list all those folks down. So folks that you know from your clubs, if you play any sports, any rec activities, if you participate in Startup Weekend, things like that, or different competitions. Your director of STEM equity, like he's part of your network. I'm part of your network now. So really thinking of like how do you expand upon it and not really undervalue or underestimate the people that you know already, because they can help you along the way too. And really we're not behind. We just have a very different kind of network that we're coming into the force with. So, with that said, focus on these 3 things. Go online. There's more resources. That's basically like how I figured out to do a lot of this stuff, since my mom didn't exactly know how. But there is a wealth of resources that we can leverage for ourselves and really help expand our community. And if we can get these 3 basic things right and stand out in our own way using the different technology or resources that are available already, then someday we can be the white lady looking off into the sunrise with her dream job and success. And with that, thank you.